everyone, my name is Julia and welcome back to my digital classroom. You are watching lesson 10 out of 10 in our unit on the executive branch of the American government. Today's topic is Supreme Court nominations. As always, my resources come from iCivics.com. You can check them out using the QR code above me. And you know I'm still committed to giving you a lesson in 10 minutes or less, so let's get started. Our lesson objectives for today are to identify the ways in which the nomination of a Supreme Court justice is and is not political. We're going to compare some judicial philosophies, and we're going to evaluate the effect of politics on the nomination process. Let's jump right in. First, what is the Supreme Court? You're going to move on to a unit on the judicial branch next, but let's do a little bit of comparison. Congress is to the legislative branch, as the president is to the executive branch, as the Supreme Court is to the judicial branch. That's all to say that Supreme Court is the top dog of the judicial branch, and it's a bench of 9 judges. So how are they chosen? Well, by the president, of course. So here are the big ideas. Look at the second bullet point, though. I know that that yellow highlight over treaty is a little bit misleading. The president's job is to nominate and appoint some government positions like ambassadors and Supreme Court justices. Now, we've already talked about how the president can appoint some other people in office, but we skipped Supreme Court justices. So let's go back. You're actually going to see that the process is super similar. First, the president will nominate or choose someone for the position of a Supreme Court judge. The Supreme Court justices are actually assigned for life, so the president doesn't just pick all of them at one time. As one person leaves or retires or steps down for whatever reason, the president will pick someone to take their place. So these aren't necessarily requirements, they aren't listed anywhere, but basically it's seen as kind of ridiculous if the president chooses someone who doesn't have these things. They should have some law school background, legal background and training. Experience in the U.S. Court of Appeals is very common to see, especially because you'll learn about this, but the U.S. Court of Appeals comes right underneath the Supreme Court, so having experience there is very important. Experience as a lawmaker, a government attorney, a law professor, something of some of that kind, because they are expected to behave and act as a judge in the top-ranking court of the country. They should probably have some legal background. Some additional considerations is, will this person get Senate approval? Because as we know in an appointment process, the Senate has to approve anyone that the president nominates. That's still true here. So, would you really nominate someone if you know that it's going to get shut down? Something to consider. Is the person controversial? Is the general public going to have a negative reaction to you nominating this specific person? Something to also consider. And finally, how will this person affect the court's diversity? That's not to say that the president is sitting there thinking about race and if they're in gender biases. That's not it at all. We're talking here about political party affiliation. For example, if the Supreme Court currently has 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats, how will this ninth person affect the sway of the Supreme Court? That is up to the president. And so you're more typical to see a Republican nominate a Republican and a Democrat choose a Democrat. So those are also things to consider whenever you're voting for president, because you want to think, where would I want the sway to be, in the Republican area or the Democrat area? But let's finish this process. First, you nominate, then then there will be a ton of background investigations because more than other political, the thing is, whenever other people are appointed or elected, they serve shorter terms, but Supreme Court justices serve lifelong terms. So lots of background checks need to be done. Then Senate Judiciary Committees, a small group within the Senate will hold hearings judging this person, thinking if they like them or not. If they like them, they will vote to recommend them to nominate that person to the entire Senate. Now it's open to the rest of the entire Senate. All 100 people will have to listen to hearings about this person, and then they will vote to confirm that nominee. If they are voted in, that nominee is sworn in, and they are the new Supreme Court Justice. Interesting, right? So now let's talk about politics in the court. I talked about this a little bit ago whenever I referred to whether or not the Supreme Court was weighted more towards the Republican side or the Democrat side. That's called a tilt. And it's when people expect the president to choose justices that will help fulfill the political agenda, meaning they expect them to align themselves to a specific political party so that more stuff can get done. But let's be very clear here. Even with a tilt, judges are still expected to set aside, not side aside. Teachers aren't perfect. They're expected to set aside personal or political views and apply the law fairly. But they may disagree on how to analyze a situation. Therefore, decisions can appear very political. So, even if they set aside their political stance and what they personally believe about a topic, they still might analyze it in a different way that might lead them towards a specific conclusion, therefore making it more political than it's supposed to be. So, keep that in mind. Now let's talk about some judicial philosophies. First is originalism. These are Supreme Court justices who want to figure out exactly what the founders intended when they wrote the Constitution in 1787. This is relevant because these justices look at legislature and they determine whether the law is constitutional or not. So, they want to know what the founders said and what they meant, and that's what they're sticking to. Textualists look at the text of the Constitution, remove any background, they read it word for word, and they give it a common sense interpretation so that it can be applied to anything at any time. Living constitutionalism means that these people prefer to interpret the Constitution based on their modern society and values. So these are three very different perspectives. They kind of fit on a spectrum here. You will see that this tends to be a trend where originalists and textualists tend to be more conservative or Republican, and living constitutionalist people tend to be more liberal or Democrat. That is not always true. That is not always the case. That's just a trend. An example of living constitutionalism exists in the case of race and education. For example, a long, long time ago, separate but equal was considered to be totally okay. It was totally normal, totally cool to have students who are black and students who are white in two different schools, and they were considered equal. However, as time passed, a different set of Supreme Court justices looked at that and said that is absolutely not okay, and they determined a new constitutionality. They said that is not okay. Everyone needs to be included together. You can see that there are many Supreme Court cases about that. So that's just an example of how living constitutionalism has kind of worked, because the same constitution was interpreted at two different times to mean two different things. So you might see that trend as well. Now let's talk about some nomination scandals. Not everyone who's been nominated has been sworn into office, but why? So, you are going to have an assignment where you are going to pick one of these four people. One of them has been nominated and confirmed to the Supreme Court. The rest have not. They were nominated, but they ended up withdrawing or not getting recommended. And I want you to find out why. So, you're going to pick one of them. You're going to do some light research. So, listen close. Robert Bork was borked. What exactly does that mean? Do some research and find out. He was nominated by Ronald Reagan in 1987. Harriet Miers, is she the best woman for the job? She was nominated by George W. Bush in 2005. Clarence Thomas was doing a balancing act. How much was he going to sway the Supreme Court justices as they were? Was it going to be a huge deal? Was it not? Was he going to make it? Who knows? He was nominated by George H.W. Bush in 1991. Finally, Merrick Garland. He was playing a waiting game. Was he ever really going to get nominated for Supreme Court? Well, he was nominated by Barack Obama in 2016, so read some more to find out. So here's your Flipgrid assignment. You're going to pick one of those four people, do some light research, answer these questions. Who nominated the person? Did they become a justice? Why or why not? What was the scandal? Follow the Flipgrid link that is highlighted in yellow and record your response. Title your video with the person that you chose, because you're going to have to respond to a friend who did a different person than you. You can comment on something you liked about their video and something you learned different. Well, folks, that is all I have for you. That concludes this unit, but I very much appreciate you following along with me. If you have any questions, find me on Twitter at Giulia Pucci edu. You can also scan the QR code on the left side of your screen. Visit my website, juliapucci.weebly.com. That's everything from me. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye.